with an update on the situation in Syria and Turkey. You heard from the Secretary General. You heard from the Secretary General this morning, who announced the launching of a $397 million humanitarian appeal for the people of earthquake-ravaged Syria over the next 3 months. The needs are immense, he said, and the most effective way to stand with the people is by providing this emergency funding. He underscored that aid must get through to all sides, from all sides, through all routes, without any restrictions. He said that the scale of the disaster is one of the worst in recent memory, and 1 week after the devastating earthquakes, millions of people across the region are struggling for survival, are homeless in freezing temperatures. We're also in the final stages of putting together an emergency appeal for Turkey. Thank you. In terms of what's going on the ground, we are continuing to mobilize emergency teams and relief operations both in Syria and Turkey. Humanitarian efforts are being rapidly scaled up, and more assessments are being planned to identify the priority needs, such as heavy machinery for debris removal, medical supplies, shelter, and other items, including heating, emergency food, and sanitation assistance. According to the latest updates that we have, the first convoy of 11 trucks, which are from the International Organization for Migration, transporting non-food items, crossed into northwest Syria through the Bab al-Salam crossing, which is one of the 2 additional crossings we're now being able to use. In addition, 26 trucks with supplies from UNHCR, the International Organization for Migration, and the World Health Organization crossed through the Bab al-Hawa crossing, bringing the total number of trucks that have crossed from Turkey into northwest Syria through this crossing point to 58 over the past 5 days. They are carrying aid from food and tents to cholera testing kits and essential medicine. Our colleagues are reporting that close to 9 million people in Syria have been impacted by last week's by the devastating earthquake. The damage is worse in the northwest, where more than 4.2 million people were impacted, in Aleppo, and 3 million in Idlib. More than 7,400 buildings have been destroyed or damaged. In the northwest, the response capacity continues to be worrying. Our local partners have conducted rubble removal. UNHCR has distributed over 900 tents, and IOM has distributed also some 1,150 tents and 1,700 non-food item kits, which were pre-positioned in the area prior to these earthquakes. Also, WHO in Syria has airlifted 37 tons of emergency medical supplies today, which can cover 465,000 cases. This is the second WHO airlift, with the first having arrived on February 11th. In Aleppo, UNICEF is providing drinking water through emergency water, trucking to about 60,000 internally displaced people in shelters and impacted neighborhoods. The World Food Program, for its part, and its partners have so far supported 60,000 beneficiaries with hot meals, ready-to-eat packages in Aleppo, Latakia, Tartus, and Hama. Education partners are also supporting the Ministry of Education for damaged schools in Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and Latakia. Over 70,000 people have benefited from protection services since the beginning of the emergency, and 10 active child protection centers and 15 mobile teams are active. Our colleagues at the UN Disengagement Observer Force, otherwise known as UNDOF, been working in coordination with UN's Humanitarian Affairs Department, and they've delivered on the 12th and 14th of February, that is today, on an exceptional basis, humanitarian assistance made up of rations, bedding, warm clothes, and water in support of relief efforts in Aleppo. And at least 20 reception centers have been set up in both Idlib and Aleppo governorates, partners working on food security have helped 142,000 people with ready-to-eat food, and some 50,000 people have received cash grants. Turning to Turkey, the UN Refugee Agency is supporting the relief efforts of the government of Turkey. They've supplied emergency shelter materials, blankets, hygiene, kitchen items, and solar lamps. So far, UNHCR has provided 9,000 kitchen sets, 3,000 hygiene kits, 3,000 sanitizers, and over 2,100 foam mattresses and 3,300 blankets to temporary accommodation centers in Kahramanmaraş, Gaziantep, Osmaniye, Malatya, Kilis, and Hatay. Further tents and winter kits from UNHCR global stocks are also being deployed. Just want to flag that tomorrow we hope to have at least one, if not two guests briefing you from the region. One will be the UNFPA's Arab States Regional Director, Laila Bakr. She will be joining us from Aleppo, and we hope to also have possibly somebody from the World Food Program also briefing you from the region. And also another programming note, tomorrow at 10 a.m. in Geneva, which is 4 a.m. here in New York. Martin Griffiths will be joined by Filippo Grandi and jointly launch the Ukraine Humanitarian Response Plan and Regional Refugee Response Plan for Ukraine. There will be a video message from the Secretary General, which we'll share with you under embargo. Speaking of the Secretary General, after speaking to you this morning, he went to the Security Council and spoke at a debate on sea level rise. He said that sea level rise is not only a threat multiplier with rising seas threatening lives and jeopardizing access to water, food, and health care. Saltwater intrusion can also decimate jobs and entire economies in key industries like agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. The Secretary General added that we must address the root causes of rising seas, which is the climate crisis, with more concerted action to reduce emissions and ensure climate justice. We must also broaden our understanding of the root causes of insecurity, he said, by addressing poverty, discrimination, inequality, violations of human rights, environmental disasters like rising sea levels. Last, he said, we must address the impacts of rising seas across legal and human rights frameworks, including international refugee law. People's human rights do not disappear because their homes do, he said. The remarks were shared with you. His deputy, Amina Mohammed, is in Norway today for the Oslo Energy Forum, where she called for urgent action to ramp up renewables, end the energy poverty, and secure sustainable energy. During her meeting with Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Støre, the Deputy Secretary General highlighted the global impacts of the war in Ukraine, as well as the importance of multilateralism. Ms. Mohammed discussed the energy transition, championing SDG 7, as well as transforming food systems with government officials, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annika Hultfield, and the Minister of International Development, Ann Tvinnereim. She expressed the need for solidarity and support to the Afghan people following her recent trip. To conclude her travels to Norway, she met with a high-level expert group on financing international efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We often talk to you about what happens when UN humanitarian agencies do not have enough cash. Well, in Bangladesh, the World Food Program today said that 6 years into the Rohingya refugee crisis, a dire funding shortfalls is forcing them to cut back life-saving food assistance for the first time, and more cuts may be needed unless there is an immediate international support. This first envisioned ration cut from $12 to $10 per person per month will have an immense and long-lasting impact on food security and nutrition, which are already at concerning levels. Many families have experienced serious levels of acute malnutrition in recent years, despite our colleagues' best efforts on the ground. WFP is urgently appealing for $125 million to avoid ration cuts, or minimum $80 million to limit ration cuts to 1 in 2023. Without fresh funding by April this year, additional rounds of ration cuts may entail a reduction of $4 per person. Each cut would be devastating as refugees remain nearly fully dependent on assistance of this type. And the International Organization for Migration and its partners are appealing today for $84 million to provide humanitarian development assistance to more than 1 million migrants and the communities hosting them along the eastern route from the Horn of Africa to Yemen. The appeal comes to address the dire needs as well as protection risks and vulnerabilities that migrants face in the region. IOM notes that the eastern route is one of the busiest, most complex, and dangerous migratory routes in the world. Mobility in the Horn of Africa through Yemen to the Gulf states continues to be triggered by interconnected crises, including persistent insecurity, conflict, harsh climate conditions, public health emergencies, in addition to socioeconomic drivers and more traditional seasonal factors. The Economic and Social Council's ad hoc advisory group on Haiti issued today a joint statement calling on the international financial institution to support Haiti's efforts towards stability and sustainable development. The full statement is on the front page of ECOSOC's website. And lastly, the honor roll is up to 47. We thank the Czech Republic, Georgia, Morocco, and Poland for their budget contributions, and there's still time for the other member states to make it onto the honor roll for those who can pay. Edith, and then Margaret.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups. Have there been any obstacles so far to getting aid, especially through Bab al-Salam, and is there any indication of when the first convoy is going to go through the second point? I believe it's Al-Ri.
Yes. No, there has not been any issues. In fact, things went very well this morning. We have an assessment team at the third site, Al-Ri, to see how quickly we can get it up and running. But we're very optimistic that things will move quickly. As we've said, a lot of these sites, along with others, had been used by relief organizations not affiliated with the UN. And their roads, from what I was told, are in better condition than the original, than the point we've been using, Bab al-Hawa.
Secondly, what's the status of the cross-line convoy that seems to have been stymied, at least by local reports, by Hayat al-Sham rebel group?
There's nothing to report on that. We're continuing our discussions with all our partners in trying to get that convoy through. That remains, cross-line remains important. And we're also very pleased to have greater capacity on the cross border, which we'll exploit to the maximum of our ability.
And lastly, when do you expect to announce the emergency appeal for Turkey?
As soon as we can, probably in the coming days. Madame Bashir.
Steph, I'm just checking your math, because yesterday you said a total of 58 trucks had crossed into northwest Syria from southern Turkey. And today you're adding 26 trucks, and then you're saying the total from Bab al-Hawa was 58 for the past 5 days. So nothing has changed crossing Bab al-Hawa? I'm confused. The 11 trucks that SG mentioned went through Bab al-Salam.
Right.
And then you said
different.
26 other trucks with multi-agency aid crossed from Bab al-Hawa. So that's not 26 new ones?
That should have been, let me
Can
check
you
the
double
math.
check?
Yeah, I will
Because maybe
double
we
check.
should be at
'cause that's-
84 and all, not
Yes,
58.
let me double check. Thank you.
Thanks.
Madame.
Quick follow-up. Bab al-Salam and Bab al-Rai, the new...
Sorry?
Bab al-Salam and Bab al-Rai,
Yeah.
the new 2 points crossing. On the Syrian side, they are controlled by the opposition, correct?
They are not in government control.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my question is about Tunisia. Do you have any comments on recent arrests that Tunisia saw in the last week and recent days? Thank you.
I mean, we're following the situation in Tunisia with concern, including, what one could call the increase, shrinking of space for the opposition, for civil society, for reporters. We still hope there is space for dialogue, but we are following this very closely. Abdelhamid, and then we'll go back.
Thank you, Stéphane. Tor Winsland just concluded a meeting with the Israeli defense minister, and he said he's engaged with all parties to restore hope for a peaceful solution. I don't know where is that hope coming from. Israel just about to approve 43 plans for building 7,000 new settlement unit. And Ben Ghafir said that he criticized Europeans and Americans for legalizing the 9 outpost settlement. He said that is good news, and we will do more of that.
With respect,
so
what is
where
the
is the
question?
hope that he's talking about?
Well,
I want to know.
He is
where is the hope?
hopeful that he's not saying there is hope now. He is working to restore hope. I think it's slightly different in my analysis.
So from the beginning of the year until today, a young man of 17-year-old was killed this morning. The total number of Palestinians killed, 49. 4 killed by settlers, 45 by the army and the security. None of these cases was condemned, although they include 10 children. The word condemned has not been used. Again, I will keep asking about. I know you get annoyed with my question.
No, I'm not getting annoyed.
I have to keep asking.
I don't. You have
until I
the right
get
to ask
some
whatever question it
satisfactory
is.
answer.
I'm not getting.
There was no condemnation.
I'm not getting annoyed. I
Two
think
cases,
we have
Palestinian
been.
killed Israeli. They
we-
were in both cases. They were condemned.
We have been very. I think we've been very clear on reporting, on condemning the violence, on expressing our increased level of disturbance at this cycle of violence, for which, as always, civilians are paying the highest price. Toshi.
Thank you. The Secretary General mentioned man-made obstacles to humanitarian aid in Syria, but now you have 2 more border crossings. What's concerning the Secretary General the most now? I mean, how can it be improved in terms
Well,
of
the more aid we can get in, the better. I think the fact that we have 2 more crossings is a step in the right direction. As your colleague Edie mentioned, we still don't have the cross line, so there is still politics in this. We want to see the politics removed. We want all of the parties involved in the situation in Syria to put first and foremost the needs of the men, the women, and the children who were so severely impacted by this earthquake first. Deji.
Never expect that.
I have expect what?
You will pick me.
Deji, don't.
Okay.
Don't play. Don't
Anyway,
play.
I have a different topic on the Nord Stream. Today, the Russian Duma said they are drafting a resolution to urge UN to conduct an investigation on the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. First, what's the reaction from the UN Secretariat? And second, if there would be an investigation, what organization or organ of the UN would do that?
For us to conduct any sort of investigation in anything, we need, for which we don't already have a mandate, which we don't clearly in this, we would need some sort of a mandate from a UN legislative body.
And we know that, I believe my colleagues have already asked you this question because there's reports that suggest that U.S. might be behind the explosion of this pipeline. Let me walk back a little bit. If this explosion it turns out to be a state behavior or state-sponsored behavior, should that country be held responsible?
I have no information
Yes, I know.
independent from what I see in the press as to what could have caused this leak, right? Which had severe impacts all around, right? Including ecological impact. So I'm not going to get ahead of my skis here and pronounce myself on something of which I have no information on.
So anybody who did this should be responsible, right?
If anyone, people who do things should be held to account. But as I say, I have zero information as to what the source and the cause of the leak is. Ephraim.
Hi, Steph. Yesterday, and you always say that pointing fingers in situations like the natural disaster who's responsible is not helpful. But when we read the news, when we listen to people in northwestern Syria complaining, the entity that's receiving all the blame is the UN itself. It is being called that it's lacking balance, principles, sovereignty of its own. A lot of criticism is being directed at the UN. No one's mentioning the other parties that are responsible for the pace of aid. So how do you respond to that?
First of all, we don't have our own sovereignty, right? We can understand the frustration and the anger of people who are in an area that because of an ongoing conflict and lack of a political agreement are not getting enough aid. I can tell you that the United Nations, from the Secretary General on down, are focused on getting as much aid there as possible. We've had a preposition there. We've had trucks going in, many trucks, trying to get the exact number, many trucks going in. The aid is being distributed by local partners. It may be an issue of people not understanding that what is being distributed by some local partners is in fact UN aid. I'm not going to criticize angry voices coming from an area that has been devastated. I will just say that we are focused on getting as much aid in as possible. The UN itself cannot do it alone. The Secretary General himself cannot do it alone. Martin Griffiths cannot do it alone. WFP, UNFPA. The entire international community needs to step up. We don't have heavy equipment, right? We don't have search and rescue teams. The international community has. Many of them, many countries have that capacity. They need to help people who need that help, regardless of who runs the area where they are, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their political position. Murad, and then Stefano, and then we'll go back.
Thank you, Stephen. When do you expect that the UN will receive the 397 million? And have you received any response from any country
No,
that
I mean,
willing to
not
contribute?
I don't know if we received any response between the time the SG announced it and now. How quickly? It depends how quickly people open up their checkbooks, right? So we hope it is as quickly as possible. We need this help now. I mean, millions of people are left homeless. Millions of people are in the cold. We need donors. We need member states to be generous. And we also need the private sector to be generous and be generous quickly. And whatever pledges are given should be converted to cash as quickly as possible, because there's also often a lag between a pledge and hard cash.
The 50 million that announced that the UN received,
Yeah.
is
No,
it included?
the 50 million that were issued through our Central Emergency Fund, which is sort of the emergency piggy bank that our humanitarian colleagues have access to, which is money that is controlled by the UN. Martin Griffiths, as head of OCHA, runs the Central Emergency Response Fund. He often gives the order for money to be disbursed quickly in an emergency to kickstart. But it is really just the spark through which we can start our humanitarian operations. It is not a sustainable funding mechanism. Stefano.
Thank you, Stéphane. What the Secretary General will answer to important politicians, but also public opinion around the world that think that the Ukrainian war, the war in Ukraine, actually Ukraine and its president, he's responsible? What will answer?
That what?
That for the
That who is responsible for the war in Ukraine?
yes, no, to whom he says that is President Zelensky responsible for the war?
You know, I think that those are always good questions for analysts and journalists.
No.
So,
This
no,
is,
you ask the demanda. let me give me the resposta. Yeah. Our focus is on achieving a just peace, one in line with the charter, one in line with international international law. It is important for the people of Ukraine who have suffered already suffered so much. It is also important for the world as a whole because we've seen the impact on a global scale of this conflict, notably on issues of food security, on energy prices, which impacts everyone. So we want to see an end to this war. We will let historians, journalists, and analysts look backwards.
allow me just a quick follow-up because I don't want to be that there is a misunderstanding here. Of course, I was referring to former Premier Silvio Berlusconi, that he just have said this, what I said, that Zelensky is responsible. Now, because the reason why I mentioned public opinion is because Secretary General of the United Nations has also, I think, has an influence, can have an influence on public opinion. So when his statements, it's like a pope in a way. He says something, people should listen.
Well, you know, I don't kiss his ring every morning when I see him. But I will let you know.
So I formulate again the question.
I understand the question. I also do not want to get into a polemic and provide color commentary to what, not only to what sitting leaders may say, but especially to what former leaders may say. Maggie, and then we'll get back to Abdelhamid and then Yvonne, who's...
I'll give you a very easy question. Where's Mr. Griffiths today? Is he still in the region or he's moved on?
No, Mr. Griffiths should be on a plane and landing in Geneva very shortly, where tomorrow he will unleash the Ukrainian appeal. Abdelhamid and then Yvonne.
I have also an easy question. Where's
I'll be the
Mr.
judge
de
of that.
Mistura?
Yeah. Sorry?
We haven't heard from Stéphane de Mistura for a long time. Is there good news or bad news, his absence? How do you qualify his absence?
There is neither good news nor bad news. There's just continued determination from Mr. de Mistura.
Where is he now?
He is most likely in Brussels, but I hope to have an update for you on his activities soon.
Thank you.
Yvonne.
Thank you. Is the UN, is your office able to estimate at all how many people may have lost their lives as a result of the delay in getting such rescue teams into northwest Syria and aid?
I think short answer is no. I think it's a very difficult question to answer because it seems to me like a very difficult question to answer. Obviously, in any earthquake, the quicker you get help, the quicker you get heavy machinery in, the more lives you can save. We may be getting into a morbid issue of once you find people in the rubble, how long did they survive for? I don't know. So I don't have the answer to that question. Ephraim.
Sorry, Stéphane. David Grassley, do we know when this week?
Yes, that's a good question. Hopefully Fahan will let me know. Okay. I will... Grassley on Thursday, I'm told. Excellent. I will leave you, you will leave me, and the Romanian foreign minister is going to be at the stakeout in about a minute or three. Thank you for your patience and your cooperation at your math. Trust me, I don't want to say anything with the mic.